we are defining standards that just make sense. Things like transparency. Let's say an AI agent is calling you on the phone, is going to explain lab results to you. It should announce that it's an AI agent. It shouldn't try to fake being a human. And so that's an example where the standards that we're defining really make it clear that you want to be transparent with the consumer so the consumer can make a decision. Does this feel okay to me? I think that's all part of the underlying goal of establishing trust, that this new technology, while it's certainly not magic, it can do some great things, but it needs to do it in a way that we all feel pretty comfortable.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today, as I mentioned in the introduction, we have a fantastic guest with us. David Norris, co-founder and CEO of Affinion Health, joins us to discuss how his team is using AI to tackle one of healthcare's biggest challenges, provider burnout. Affinion is building an AI-powered inbox that helps clinicians manage the flood of daily messages, lab results, and administrative tasks. By reducing this burden, they're giving time back to clinicians and helping restore the balance in their day-to-day practice. In addition to leading Affinion Health, David also donates his time to CHAI, which is the Coalition for Health AI, a nonprofit organization working to create responsible industry standards for AI in healthcare. Hey, David, are you ready to be our guru today?
I sure am. It's great to be here.
We're very excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Well, I am a super passionate cyclist and I love to do competitive events. So you can find me on any particular day on a gravel trail or a road doing some fun stuff and staying fit.
Oh, I love that. So you, before we started recording, you mentioned you're out in the Colorado area. So you do a lot of the mountainous trails and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I live at 10,000 feet, so I have pretty good lungs, so I can do pretty much anything, and I enjoy it. The only problem is when people come to visit, they often aren't used to the altitude.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that takes a moment, right? So that's fantastic. So, David, Affinion is addressing provider burnout in a really practical way, it seems. And I'm wondering if you can share the origination of the story with Affinion Health and how the AI inbox came to be. Can you share with us some of that story?
Sure. So the problem that providers face is that they're spending more and more time behind the computer rather than with patients. And a lot of that's been driven by, the introduction of electronic health record systems that require that the provider put a lot of information in. And that's translated into a big problem. Providers are really just being ground into the dirt with so much administrative work that many of them are choosing to just go do something else. And right now, there's a projected shortage of providers in 2030 that's pretty significant. So we decided to apply the new technologies that have now become available over the last 2 or 3 years to try to address this problem and give providers tools to help them do their job both better and more efficiently so they can free up time to go spend time with patients.
Yeah, I love that. I've been in the medical device industry for 40 something years, and I've noticed it, right? Interacting with clinicians, and they've always got their work pad with them, or, you get in and you're watching a procedure and there's so much time interacting with a computer, right? And it's really kind of taken them away from that personal interaction, right?
Yeah, if you think about it, you go to the doctor for your annual checkup, and they typically order 5 to 10 labs. And the next day, those lab results come into the inbox. And if you're seeing 20 patients a day, that's hundreds of lab results. And on top of that, there's a lot of patient messages and other things that bog them down. So, if you talk to a provider, they're generally trying to squeeze a little inbox time in before seeing patients and between patients, and then almost always after dinner. And that just gets old after a while. And we've all experienced, you may get a little bit of a delay from the time your lab results come in. Like you might see them and then you're waiting and you're waiting, hoping the provider is going to send you a note like, okay, what are we going to do next? And if that takes more than 3 or 4 days, you might shoot a note over to your doctor saying, hey, what are we going to do here? And you just helped to make their inbox even worse.
Yeah.
So, it's a big, complicated as many providers say, treadmill that never ends.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's got to be a drain as you discussed, but I'm just kind of wondering if you've got any like data or outcomes in terms of how big is this problem, and then maybe some information on what kind of an impact the AI automation can have. Do you have any insights for us there?
We've done a bunch of surveys going out and trying to better understand how providers are working the inbox, how much time is it taking, and how much stress is it creating? And the answers are crazy. The numbers are over 90% of providers complain that the inbox is one of the biggest time sinks for them, and it's taking them away from both seeing patients and seeing more patients, but also spending time with existing patients. So it's a big problem. We've measured the results of our solution, and on average, we're saving about 5 hours a week for a PCP. And so for most providers that see, let's say, 3 patients an hour, 5 hours is a lot in a week. So, and most providers aren't going to just see more patients. They're going to take a little bit of that time and go have dinner with their family and try to decompress a little bit, which is good. And so I think AI is the first really major technology that has made a significant impact in this area.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking about that 5 hours, right? And I know my inbox is nowhere near as cluttered as a busy provider, but sometimes, I find it's just hard to get a little bit of think time too, right? During the day where you've got a task you want to tackle or a problem you're trying to solve. If you constantly getting pinged, it's hard to focus, right? So I would imagine that's a big part of it too, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. There's three kind of key areas that we think are super valuable for providers. One is just freeing up time, and that's great. The second is really helping them to do a better job. And so with AI, we can actually do what we call speed reading. So with AI, we can read an entire patient chart, 10 years of history in 3 seconds. And we can then help to surface things that might not be easy to find. So for the provider, that's super helpful. I think of it like shining a flashlight, like, look here. And by doing that, we can allow them to use their clinical expertise to do even a better job. And so that's, the second thing. The third is, as you said, reducing the cognitive load. So by removing some of the noise so that they can then focus on the things that are more important, they can actually have a better time getting through things like lab results. I heard a provider the other day said, I'm a very different doctor at 8 a.m. than I am at 5 p.m. And I think that speaks to the problem, which is, you can't, there's not just an infinite bandwidth here. Providers do have a limit. And if you throw a lot of sort of really ridiculous noise at them where they're having to do a lot of administrative things that aren't really clinically important, that eats into their ability to do a good clinical job on the things that are difficult. So I think AI is the first technology that can actually help by, in my words, making them superhuman.
Yeah, yeah, that's really very interesting, and I'd like to drill into that just a little bit further and talk about that AI inbox itself, right? So you touched on it a little bit, but maybe you can get a little more granular with us in terms of what tasks is it really handling, and then with that, what kind of feedback are you getting from your early users with what it's doing?
Well, some of the features that we do are, I think, what all of us would like for our inboxes. But for the provider, it's the clinical inbox. So it's things coming in that are more clinically focused, like lab results. And there's a lot of features that are amazing that they don't already exist. I'll give you an example. Let's say a provider comes into their inbox and they have, 200 things sitting there. They don't know which ones are more critical and which ones are not. They all just are sitting there. So the provider has to, every time they have 5 minutes and they want to try to eat away at the inbox, they just chronologically go through it. So one of the things that we do is we help them sort it into high and low priority. And that, again, using AI, we can pre-read the entire inbox and figure out which things are more important than others. So when they do have 5 minutes and they want to try to spend that on the most important things, they can do that. We do other things like we take lab results coming in and we're able to go back and compare each analyte with the prior lab values and highlight things that the provider really needs to know about. So rather than looking at 15 or 20 pages of lab results, we can bring to the top the most important ones. And interestingly, we can do it where we're looking at the abnormal lab results as well as normal. It's interesting. President Biden just was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and in most PCPs, they watch a thing called a PSA to be an indicator that there might be a problem. But a lot of providers miss that because if it's normal, they just scroll past it. And the problem is in the analyte world, we think about velocity. So how quickly does something change, even if it's normal? And Affinion has the ability to highlight those things that have changed a lot, but are still normal, that the provider might normally just not recognize as a problem. And I think that, especially in the PSA area with prostate cancer, can be a great way to help find those things early. And again, AI can do it because it's doing an immense amount of work behind the scenes very quickly. Most providers just can't spend the time to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because lab results are really a trend over time, right? So I can see that value, right, where it's gone from maybe a very low value, well in within range of normal, as it's creeped up to maybe close to that caution, but still normal, right? That's showing something's going on here, right? And if you're busy, like you don't have that think time that we were talking about, you could easily miss that, right?
Yeah, and it's not the provider's fault. For
Mhm.
them, if they are looking at a lab result and they're looking at a PSA, and now they have to go back into the patient chart and click and go look at what was the prior value. I mean, you just added minutes
Mhm.
to their time. And so, again, using AI, it's great because we can go speed read the entire patient chart. We can take the PSA and compare it to the prior value and then show it right there to the provider. So now they're not wasting their time clicking and scrolling. They're actually just seeing, oh, here's a significant change I need to think about. And that's, again, the power of AI. It's not doing the job for the provider, it's simply bringing to the top the key information the provider needs to be able to make a great clinical decision. I think that's an area that a lot of people maybe have a misconception about AI. It's not that it's going to replace your doctor, it's that it's going to help your doctor be superhuman by giving them what they need to know to make a good decision.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. So, uh, David, just to shift a little bit, a lot of our gurus that we've had over the last couple of years have talked about how difficult it is to get to clinicians and talk to them and start to build that trust. So, obviously they're naturally cautious when it comes to new technology as well. And I'm wondering how you've approached this building trust with clinicians and encouraging the adoption of your technology. Do you have any best practices you can share with us?
It's a really good question. Yeah, we've taken a very specific approach. We have designed our system to give providers complete control of everything it does. So we have a lot of configuration options and a lot of protocols that allow the provider to feel comfortable that this new tool is going to do what they want. I analogize it to if you were to hire an assistant to triage your inbox, you would tell them, I want you to do these things and don't do these things. You would be pretty specific. So when our AI agent goes to do things, it's doing it completely under provider control. And there's a lot of options for starting with a kind of toe in the water with a manual version where the AI can tell you what it would have done, but it doesn't actually do anything. So you can just watch.
Mhm.
And that builds confidence. So our approach has been very specific to give providers complete control and then an incremental way to allow the AI to do more and more as they feel comfortable. And I think that's just a logical way to do it. You wouldn't jump in a car and go 100 miles an hour. You'd start slow and kind of get a feel for things and then take a next step. That builds a lot of trust.
Yeah. Does that take a lot of coaching on your part, or is it just intuitive that they can start to migrate into more and more complex tasks with your technology?
Yeah, great point. We built our solution to integrate directly into the EHR so the provider doesn't have to learn anything new. There's no new workflow, there's no new app to install or log into. And I think that's a key for providers. like all of us, they hate learning new things and changing their workflow. So with Affinion, they don't have to do that. And it's intuitive. So when you come into it, it is so easy that while we offer training, almost no provider will actually do the training because they can just start using the product without really having to have any instruction. It's that intuitive.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, I was also, when I did my research, intrigued with Chai, as I mentioned in the introduction, the Coalition for Health AI. Right, there's a lot of things going on in that world, a lot of data being looked at. So, I'm wondering, why is it, why is the responsible use of AI so important in healthcare, and how are you helping to shape the industry standards?
Well, as you said, we're in the leadership role at Chai, helping to drive some of the new standards. And the goal is pretty simple. We don't want the government to have to come in and regulate healthcare and the use of AI. We think that the industry should take a leadership role in helping to define standards that make sense. So, as an organization, and Chai is really a large organization now, we have participation across many, many players in the health system. We are defining standards that just make sense. Things like transparency. So, should, let's say, an AI agent is calling you on the phone, is going to explain lab results to you, well, it should announce that it's an AI agent. It shouldn't try to fake being a human. And so that's an example where the standards that we're defining really make it clear that you want to be transparent with the consumer so the consumer can make a decision. Does this feel okay to me? And so Chai's playing a very important leadership role in that area. And it's really hard. You get thousands of companies together and try to define standards. But I think we're doing that hard work to try to make that happen. I think that's all part of the underlying goal of establishing trust that this new technology, while it's certainly not magic, it can do some great things, but it needs to do it in a way that we all feel pretty comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, that's helpful. Thanks for that. And I'm also curious, as you've started your business here, startups often face a tough balance between innovation and then the regulatory environment. So I'm curious about what are some of the challenges that you faced with Affinion, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think it's a pretty important point as you go to start an early stage company. Often in some industries, you can just build a product and take it to market. But in a regulated industry like healthcare, you can't do that. You have to have certain security, capabilities so that you are handling information safely. So that raises the bar. It costs a lot more money and it takes more time to build a business in an industry like this. And that applies to AI also. So you have the normal set of things like security to deal with HIPAA, and then you also have the now AI compliance around things to do with what is AI doing, what should it do, what it should it not do. So building an early stage company in healthcare in AI is quite a bit more challenging and requires more time and effort and money than a company in other industries. That said, the opportunity is also huge because healthcare has so many challenges. It on the one side, it's hard and takes time. On the other side, it's great because it's an enormous industry with a lot of challenges that AI can address. So it's a trade off.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's helpful. And then I'm curious. I mean, we touched a little bit about some of the feedback, but for an early stage company, clinical engagement is crucial, right, to get some of that feedback and that development. So what's been your approach to involving physicians and other healthcare teams in your product development process?
Well, we've taken a bit of a different approach than some. So I am very pro provider. I'll just say that up
Mhm.
front. I believe that we have a mission to do as technologists to do everything that we can to equip providers with the best tools possible. And that's the mission of Affinion is to help providers with new technology, but to bring it to them in a way that's very practical and usable. So we've engaged providers from day one very, very aggressively. We really want their feedback, and they are helping to define everything we do, and they're helping to define all the features and capabilities of the products. And by embracing providers, I think we have an advantage. Some people disagree. Some people hate to go out and ask 10 providers questions because you'll end up with 11 different answers. And that's a common philosophy is, there a lot of people find providers to be not as helpful. We very much love working with providers, and we are on a mission to help them. So it just makes sense to engage them. There have been a lot of solutions in the past, like electronic health record systems, where they did not engage providers, and it was basically a billing solution, and they just gave it to providers and said, "Here, use this." And we saw firsthand the negatives of that. It was not the best experience.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I'm also curious. When I did my research, you've had quite an entrepreneurial journey, right? It includes multiple ventures. So many of our gurus out there are entrepreneurs or soon to be entrepreneurs, and I'm wondering if you can share what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned launching and scaling healthcare startups. Can you provide any insights for our gurus?
Well, first of all, I'm super supportive of entrepreneurs. So I think if you have an idea that you think is really interesting, the first thing that I've learned is that you have to believe in your own idea and go do it regardless of what everybody else says. You will get a lot of people saying, you can't do that or that won't work. And as an entrepreneur, if you listen to those people, you would never even get started. You would just stop. So you have to have enough faith. And second, I think surrounding yourself with incredible talent, whether those are advisors, board members, investors, or your team, I think that is probably the most important thing, regardless of the idea. I mean, it always helps to have a great idea, but the team is what makes it happen. So I'm a big fan of investing in amazing people around you because that will help you be successful. It is a problem that a lot of entrepreneurs think they can do everything and they don't need a team. Uh, Obviously, that's not true.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm kind of curious too with that. You mentioned earlier on that you were a competitive cyclist, right? So I'm just kind of wondering, is scaling the mountains like you were talking about on your cycle, how has that influenced your leadership style and approach to building a company?
Well, I think being an entrepreneur and certainly being a CEO is a stressful enough job. And so you have to find some way to balance the pressure. And I think for me, having a physical activity that's competitive is both good because I'm physically strong, but more importantly, it's mental health. So that's my therapy. So I think every entrepreneur has to find their own thing that works for them. But it's important to find something, whatever it is that you do to have a mental break. Otherwise, I think you'll go crazy because it's pretty challenging.
Yeah, I can see where that'd be a great outlet, right? To just kind of focus on what you're doing, right? To get your mind off of some of the day to day.
Yeah, exactly. You go out and you ride really intensely where you can't possibly think about anything else because you're going so hard, and that just is a huge relief. I think from a leadership style, riding, most people don't think of cycling as a team sport, but it is very much. And I think there's a lot to be learned when you're riding with a group of people and you have different roles to play on a team that is very similar to what you do in a company where you have a lot of different roles and people need to work together to achieve a larger goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, and I can see how that would be very, very helpful to what you're doing. And then you also mentioned, the finding quality people and, developing partnerships. All of that takes a lot of time and money. So, with your experience, funding and partnerships, right, are always front of mind with an entrepreneur and a CEO. What advice would you give our gurus out there for building these meaningful strategic relationships in healthcare? Do you have any insights for us there?
Well, I definitely have a different approach, so it will be good for some and not good for others. But I tend to like to be very genuine, and I like to be very real in developing relationships in the industry. I have seen a lot of people that are very salesy and will try to sell. I don't like doing that. I prefer to be like what I call pattern matching. So I like to find customers that have a need, and then we have a capability. And if you can match those two together, then it's a good fit. rather than, for example, trying to twist somebody's arm and saying, you need to buy this. And I do the same thing with partnerships. You try to find natural alignment around things that make sense. And when there's a win-win, you generally have a successful relationship. A lot of entrepreneurs will go out and try to sign up a lot of partners just to have big names or big logos on their website. And the problem is if there's not a real solid benefit on both sides, those relationships just they fizzle out. So I kind of start the other way, which is, what's the alignment around value on both sides that makes sense? And as an entrepreneur, you got to be a little careful where you spend your time. You have a very limited amount of time that you can spend, and it's better to spend those on real relationships.
Yeah, I love that. And in a way, even though you're discussing not being salesy, it's really great sales advice too. At the same time, right? Because I've been in the sales and marketing end of this industry for 40 plus years, and I find that when you've got that genuine attitude, right, and you're there because of curiosity, and you're there to try to help, the clinicians serve their patients in a better way, that really it turns out to be a better outcome. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think none of us like to be sold to, kind of kind of the car salesperson kind of analogy. And I think it's much better to be genuine, to see if what you do as a business is valuable to somebody else that has a need. And if there's a nice match there, then do it. And as an early stage company, it's really important to hear feedback from your customers and your partners. I think listening is one of the skills that most entrepreneurs don't have. And it's easy to talk, but when you're trying to listen and hear the feedback from those customers, they will tell you everything if you'll just listen.
Absolutely. Very good advice. So, David, this seems like a really exciting time for you and your team at Affinion Health. What's the future hold? Where are you going from here?
Well, it is a super exciting time. We are solving a problem that is extremely painful for providers, and they want a solution. So we're growing at an incredible clip. So our company is really destined to be a solution that can address all kinds of workflow issues that the providers have, starting with the inbox and beginning to branch out into other things that cause either a lot of pain or limit their ability to do their business. And that is pretty exciting. Once you build a relationship with a practice and you're solving a problem, and now you can solve a second or third problem for them, they're very grateful. And you've built trust and you've built a meaningful relationship. So that's where we're going, is really just helping to tackle more and more problems for providers.
Oh, that's fantastic. It does sound like a very exciting time. So, David, first of all, I'd like to thank you and acknowledge you for the time it took to be our guru today. If somebody wants to learn more about you and your team at Affinion Health, or you personally, is there a website, or are you on LinkedIn? How do we learn more?
Sure, you can go to our website, which is affinion.com, or definitely feel free to reach out to me either via email, david.norris@affinion.com, or on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. So feel free to reach out. We love to talk to fellow entrepreneurs, and to the degree we can be helpful, we'd love to help.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, David, once again, thank you so much. I appreciated your time and insights in being our guru today.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048 and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.